Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And y'all, welcome to another episode of Activists Around the World, or Feminists Around the World. We still interchange the segment, I guess, a little bit, but that's what it is. And recently I was on the show Cool People Who Did Cool Stuff with Margaret Killjoy. I think I've already mentioned this. And we talked about one specific librarian that really helped shape the library system, as well as her work in preserving stories from her culture in Puerto Rico, which led me down a path of learning about an indigenous community that I didn't know much about. I wanted to talk about a couple of the women in the community and how they are fighting to preserve their community, as well as advocate for so much more, because we know when it comes to indigenous activism, it's intersectional. Like, they are the core of intersectional almost. So let's talk about the Taino Nation and a couple of the women who are hard at work to preserve their legacy, as well as saving the land around them. Go ahead and put this warning. A lot of the names in here I could not find. I don't know if it's my algorithm. I don't know if the internet's like, screw you, we're going to go ahead and quit before 2025. I don't know what, because I was only finding Instagram videos, which, if you know anything about that, is not helpful. So when it comes to pronunciations of names and such, it's hard for me to get. I am going to try my best. There's a little bit of guessing happening. If those of you who are very familiar with the Taino culture as well as their language, please send us information on how to say it correctly, because I have a feeling we're going to talk a little more about them and what they're working on and what they're doing, because they're doing a lot right now and they're having to fight for their own legacy. So, we love to talk about people who are just trying to establish their identity. So with that, there you go. Be pre-warned. I'm sorry for butchering things in advance. So, the Taino community is a community of people who were the first peoples of places now known as Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Haiti, the Bahamas, Puerto Rico, and parts of Lesser Antilles. And there's a chunk of people in Puerto Rico today who have identified Taino as part of their heritage. In fact, up to 92,000 Puerto Ricans have self-identified as indigenous as of 2020. And according to a National Geographic report in 2016, genetic research showed that around 61% of Puerto Ricans do have indigenous DNA. And according to an article from Brown Political Review, other scholars were able to reconstruct the complete Taino genome and were able to establish the similarities of Puerto Ricans today with those from the original Taino peoples. So this discovery only validated that many of the indigenous people who knew the depth of their genealogy, even with some saying that the Taino people were extinct, literally declaring them extinct. And this happened a long time ago, by the way. So going back to the episode with Margaret, which I just mentioned, we talked specifically about Pura Belpre, a woman of Afro-Puerto Rican descent and most likely of Taino Nation, obviously. No one ever really claims that. I don't think she ever really said that, but she knew about the legend of her heritage and her ancestors, and they were of Taino base. So we're going to go ahead and assume that. She was the first known Puerto Rican librarian at the New York Public Library, and she became well known for her storytelling and continuing of keeping the stories of the Taino community alive and written. She did puppetry, Anney. It was really, I'm like, oh, yeah, she did puppetry.
That's awesome.
I love it. And her legacy is imprinted within the library systems as well. You should go take a listen to that episode on the show. It taught me so much, and honestly, it's still kind of it warms my heart thinking about the stuff that we talked about, because it's so encouraging to hear about those who made such impact. And of course, go ahead and put that caveat of the first, as we've said for many of our episodes, that's the first known. So that's the one to be acclaimed. There may have been more, and there may have been others around the same time. I think her sister was actually a part of this movement too, in opening up the public libraries, because that was a whole revolution in itself, which, again, I love. And this is why we will always go to bat for public libraries, just an FYI. And also a great part of the resistance as 2025 comes up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to put it out there. But coming back to the legacy of the Taino community, which has continued even with the colonization by Christopher Columbus, and many other entities, the community remains. Here's a bit from that Brown Political Review article, which, by the way, was written by a Taino community member. Guarokeu Batista Kunhart. And they write, many modern heritage rescue groups, such as the Taino Dati Banuku tribe of Borican, the Taino Nation of the Antilles, the United Confederation of the Taino People, the Guatumacu Abaran Puerto Rico people, and Hagoyakue, are actively working to foster and protect the Taino culture. While many aspects of Taino culture have been lost over time or mixed with Spanish and African cultures, our heritage remains unique, and we all want to be heard and recognized for who we are. If you want to go back and look up that author that we just talked about, Batista Kunhart, in the Brown Political Review. They do a great breakdown of what has happened over the centuries and how they were seen as eradicated, even though that wasn't true, and what they're doing today to bring back that identity, to bring their tribe back as a recognized nation. So I think it's really important to talk about. But yes, people within these organizations that they mentioned and communities have been working hard to be recognized as well as save the land and resources of Puerto Rico. One specific activist is Naniki Reyes Ocasio. Ocasio is an elder and member of the Taino people and have been fighting against the gentrification and destruction of their land. They also have like books and all kinds of resources if you want to check her out and their works out. She also did one with a little documentary with John Leguizamo, which was really important and really interesting. He was able to explore the land, go through some of the rituals, because this is part of his heritage as well, and talking about the Taino people. But she's been around and doing some amazing things. In fact, in 2005, she and 6 other Taino leaders were arrested for protesting against construction on their sacred sites. Ocasio went on a hunger strike in order to have a meeting with the government at the time to talk about the lands. And during this time, the government did not recognize the people of Taino, they still don't, as an official indigenous group due to the percentage of DNA for the people who have tested as a part of that lineage. So I don't know if we've talked much about this, but people who know when it comes to indigenous peoples as well, the Native Americans, they have to have a certain percentage of DNA in order to be accounted for within a tribe, which makes sense. But some of those standards are obviously very racist standards, very political standards in order to eradicate a community of people so that they can't claim an area which was theirs and is theirs. So just as a caveat. So Ocasio has been a force in keeping the cultural practices alive as well as protecting the sacred lands. She co-founded El Caney, and here's some information about the organization from their site, El Caney del Cuento Mundo, the Taino Longhouse Learning Center, Inc., or El Caney, a not-for-profit organization in Orocovas, Puerto Rico, was founded in 1993 to provide a local and international forum on the Taino earth teachings, culture, and spiritual traditions, educate and disseminate information to local and international communities about the concerns and issues facing Taino and indigenous peoples of the Caribbean.
And here's their mission. Teach, learn, and practice traditional methods of stewardship of the land, its use, and the conservation of our forest, natural resources, and habitats. Foster, promote, vitalize, and enrich the Taino indigenous culture, language, and spiritual tradition of the Caribbean. Educate the local and international community about the concerns and issues facing Taino and indigenous peoples from a historical, traditional, and contemporary perspective. Rectify chronicled historical distortions and stereotypes about Taino and indigenous peoples of the Caribbean. Develop local and international campaigns to address the concerns and issues confronting contemporary Taino and indigenous peoples of the Caribbean. Provide an environmentally safe place where people from all nations can come together to share and contribute their skills and gifts for the collective benefit and welfare of humanity, modeling the process of nature. Provide skills training to people of all ages and abilities in the arts, earth teaching, and other disciplines to promote community pride, identity, self-esteem, self-sufficiency, interdependence, productivity, honor, respect, and caretaking the Earth Mother. Teach, learn, and practice living skills based on honoring, sharing, and respect for all life, cultures, traditions, and spiritual diversity to promote a better understandings among all peoples. And develop faculties of observation and listening to expand our perception and awareness of the interdependence of all things. And
obviously Ocasio and others from that organization, and even the other organizations that we mentioned before, have been following this mission for a while now. And another one of the Taino activists is sociologist and environmentalist Elena Maleve Marrero. I'm so sorry if I did that wrong because I could not find her name. She, along with activists like Acacio, joined in taking down the blocking of a public access area or a beach in Arecibo, Puerto Rico in 2022. But this wasn't her first experience in such activism. She actually started organizing around 2005. So here's a bit from an article written by NACLA.org or the North American Congress on Latin America about her. Malave Marrero has long advocated for protecting and preserving her country's natural resources, delicate ecosystems, and indigenous heritage. From organizing grassroots efforts demanding the demolition of an illegal construction in Puerto Rico's northwestern coastal town of Aguadilla, to testifying at legislative hearings, to camping out for a week to protest private construction on public land, her mission is clear: to stop rampant development that is destroying Puerto Rico's marine and nature reserves. And it continues, formerly trained as a socio-spatial planner, focusing on land use based on ample citizen participation and sociological knowledge applied with an urban context, Malave Marrero uses her knowledge of Puerto Rican regulatory policy to educate communities about illegal land use and the threats posed to agriculture and natural resources. She does so against the backdrop of current Governor Pedro Pierluisi's pro-state administration, one that prioritizes the interest of private investors. In this interview, Malave Marrero shares insights on the current political climate she describes as, quote, a threat not only to those of us living in Puerto Rico's indigenous name, but also to all of the natural species of marine life that call this their home. So in the last few years, she's done a lot of work fighting against the gentrification and stripping of the land. Again, she had this interview with the NACLA about her work and how she's been seeing local authorities and police trying to use illegal force in order to fight against activists in Puerto Rico. Quote, I and others are in this struggle because we are fighting for this country we love so much. Being passionate about our heritage, natural resources, and the environment moves us to do what we do. Trained as a sociologist, I'm well attuned to the dynamics of protest. As activists, cultural advocates, our emotions are inextricably tied to this work. As I discussed earlier, potential dangers exist. That's why when I'm present at these manifestations, I watch over the physical and emotional safety of those in my group. Further, as the daughter of a nurse, our collective well-being is one of my priorities. So she has talked a lot about what they've had to go through in order to try to protect these lands. So in 2005, which is when she really began organizing, is when we saw a lot of the Taino leaders coming after organizations that were trying to do construction on sacred land, stripping the land of all of its resources, again, blocking off public access areas that are sacred land for these people in order to make it privatized, as well as trying to sell it off. So we know what it looks like for those who are truly fighting to keep what is theirs, and to keep, not only just to keep it, but to preserve it, which is that other key point of like, why are we not okay with preserving historical land? Like that's the bigger conversation. And when it comes to Puerto Rico, the legacies and historical context and it being the territory of the U.S. is really, really gross. We already know how it went with the political campaigns this year. I think this is a bigger conversation we need to have in looking at what a territory looks like and the limited amount of rights and how we are destroying history and a group of people for the sake of territory ownership and making money. Stupid capitalism. I'm fine. But yeah, with that, we are excited to learn more about these activists and these women who continue to work so hard and have been working so hard to preserve that history, to preserve their culture, as well as to be recognized as a culture that I don't understand why we shouldn't be thankful and grateful that they still exist instead of them being eradicated as a group. I'm not really sure why that's a problem, but hey, okay. Again, there's so many others that have been working for both recognition, again, as a community and to preserve their lands. I'm sure we're going to come back to revisit this because I think this is such a big topic. This is such a big conversation, and it's an implication of so many other things when it comes to climate change, when it comes to, protecting of a group of people, as well as protecting of resources. It's a lot. And the Taino people are an example of what it looks like to truly, truly fight, I think, when it comes to not just for their own community, but for the greater good.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll be back for a revisit as well. And yeah, listeners, if you have any suggestions, pronunciation corrections, we do try, but apologies if we messed it up. But yeah, you can contact us in many ways. You can email us at stephanie@momstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast, or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff I Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have a TeePublic store, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks, as always, to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Jaylee.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production by iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.